the divorce papers felt heavier than paper should. They rested inside a plain brown envelope in my trembling hands as I stood outside my mother-in-law's house, convinced my marriage had reached its final chapter. Months of silence, unanswered questions, forced smiles, and lonely nights had convinced me that the woman I had once loved more than life itself no longer wanted me. I had come there with one purpose, to tell her it was over forever. But before I knocked on the door, I heard something that made my entire world stop spinning. My wife's voice, cracked with tears, drifted through the slightly open window, and what she confessed to her mother shattered every painful assumption I had carried in my heart. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all of the power of love and compassion. For nearly a year, my wife Emma had become someone I barely recognized. The laughter that once filled our little home had disappeared. She stopped reaching for my hand while we watched television, stopped asking about my day, and often disappeared into another room whenever I entered. At first, I blamed work stress. She had recently accepted more responsibilities at the hospital where she worked as an administrative coordinator, while I buried myself in endless construction projects trying to provide a better future for us. But eventually, the distance between us became impossible to ignore. Every conversation felt rehearsed, every smile looked forced, and every good night carried an invisible wall neither of us seemed able to climb. The loneliness slowly poisoned my thoughts. I convinced myself there had to be someone else. Why else would she avoid eye contact? Why would she stay awake long after I had gone to bed? Why did she suddenly begin visiting her mother every weekend without inviting me? I searched for signs that confirmed my fears instead of searching for the truth. Every missed phone call became suspicious. Every late evening at work became another piece of evidence. I never actually caught her doing anything wrong, but when fear takes control, imagination becomes stronger than facts. I tried asking her several times whether something was bothering her, but she always smiled gently and told me everything was fine. Those words hurt more than any argument could have. Everything clearly wasn't fine. We had become strangers sharing the same address. One evening, after another silent dinner where only the ticking kitchen clock seemed willing to speak, I quietly contacted a lawyer. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were ready. On the morning I planned to give them to her, I learned she had gone to visit her mother again. Something inside me refused to end our marriage through a cold envelope left on the kitchen table. I decided to drive there myself. Maybe I wanted one final explanation. Maybe I simply wanted closure. Either way, I found myself standing outside that familiar house with tears burning behind my eyes. Then I heard her voice. She wasn't speaking with anger. She was crying harder than I had ever heard before. She confessed that watching me slowly lose hope had been destroying her every single day. She admitted she had hidden the truth because she believed protecting me was the greatest act of love she could still offer. Months earlier, doctors had discovered an aggressive illness that required expensive treatment and uncertain surgeries. She had secretly emptied her savings, sold jewelry inherited from her grandmother, and taken additional shifts just to keep our finances stable without forcing me to abandon the business I had spent years building. She knew how proud I was and feared I would sacrifice everything, including my dream, to save her. Her mother begged her to tell me before it was too late. But Emma whispered that she couldn't bear seeing the disappointment in my eyes if the treatment failed. She said she would rather carry the burden alone than watch me suffer beside her. Then, through uncontrollable sobs, she confessed the words that completely broke me. She said the greatest pain wasn't her illness, it was seeing the men she loved slowly believe she had stopped loving him. The envelope slipped from my hands onto the porch. Everything I believed collapsed within seconds. Every accusation I had silently built against her now felt like a mountain of shame pressing against my chest. I realized I had mistaken sacrifice for rejection, exhaustion for indifference, and silent courage for emotional distance. When I finally knocked on the door, both women looked stunned. Emma immediately tried to wipe away her tears, but it was too late. We stood frozen for several seconds before I walked toward her and wrapped my arms around her tighter than I ever had before. Neither of us could speak. Words were too small for what we both carried. That afternoon became the first truly honest conversation we had shared in almost a year. She admitted she had been terrified. I admitted I had allowed fear to replace trust. We both cried over the months we had wasted fighting invisible battles alone. The divorce papers remained forgotten inside the envelope lying on the porch, where rain later blurred the ink until every signature line disappeared. The months that followed were anything but easy. Hospital visits replaced weekend vacations. Medical bills challenged every financial plan we had ever made. Some days hope arrived in tiny victories. Other days it seemed impossible to find. But for the first time in a long while, we faced every challenge together instead of separately. Friends organized fundraisers without being asked. Neighbors brought homemade meals. Complete strangers donated after hearing our story. The kindness of ordinary people reminded us that even during life's darkest seasons, humanity still shines. A year later, Emma stood beside me in the same backyard where we had celebrated our wedding reception years earlier. Her treatment had worked better than anyone expected. While recovery remained a journey, her smile had returned. So had mine. The divorce papers had long been replaced by framed photographs from new memories we promised never to take for granted again. Our marriage wasn't saved by a miracle. It was saved by one unexpected moment of truth and the courage to finally let love become stronger than fear. We learned that silence can destroy even the strongest relationships, while honesty, even painful honesty, can become the bridge that leads people back to each other. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel so together we can continue spreading stories of kindness, faith, and second chances. Before we end, tell us in the comments, if you were in his place, would you have forgiven her after learning the truth? We'd love to read your thoughts. Sometimes the people who seem to love us the least are actually carrying the heaviest burdens for our sake. Before giving up on someone you once promised forever, look beyond the silence. One honest conversation may save a relationship you thought was already lost, proving that love isn't measured by perfect days, but by the willingness to keep choosing each other when life becomes unbearably difficult.